Hello, I'm Maggie Hammond. I teach on the Complete Creative Writing course, and I've worked as a novelist, a publisher, a journalist, and I'm the author of Creative Writing for Dummies. I'm here to answer some common questions about writing. Romantic novels are very popular. It was David O. Selznick, the famous film director, who said there's really only one plot: boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy meets girl again. And that really sums up a romantic novel. It's a formula, and you don't want to stray too far from your formula, otherwise your readers won't be satisfied. So it's important that your heroine is realistic. You don't want to have someone who's perfect. That is really boring and your readers won't like her. So you need to have a realistic modern heroine, somebody with a job, somebody who's interesting in her own right. You need to introduce your man pretty early, but if it's obvious that this is the right man, then that's not going to be a very exciting story. You need to have a rival, so all the time your reader is reading your story, they're thinking, maybe it's this one, or maybe it's that one. You've got to keep your reader thinking that there are at least two possibilities. It's also useful sometimes to introduce your main character in a slightly different way. If you read Jane Austen's Emma, which is one of the best romantic novels ever written, Mr. Knightley is introduced right at the beginning of the story, but because he's introduced as an old friend of the family, somehow we never think of him as being the right man for Emma, and she doesn't realise it either until we're almost at the end of the story. We think she's in love with someone else, and so does she, but she's not, and that's what makes the story really interesting. If you're writing a really formulaic romantic novel like a Mills and Boon, Mills and Boon will actually give you a formula. They'll say the girl has to meet the man by page 5, he has to be so many years older than her, they have to have some misunderstanding, she has to think that he's in love with someone else, and then by page 240 or whatever it is, that's when he declares himself and she falls into his arms. Another issue today with romantic novels is, do I put sex in my romantic novel? And the answer is, you can. However, sex scenes are the most difficult things to write well. So if you can't do it well, it's best not to do it at all. It's best to hint at it. Because romantic fiction is such a formula, it's really important to think of ways that you can make it a bit different. Ways that you can do that are to choose a different location, maybe an unusual location, maybe somewhere really odd that you wouldn't think of as a background for a romantic novel. And that environment will make your story different to everyone else's, and it will also give your characters something to do when they're not falling in love with one another. And that's important too, because if all the characters do are think about Mr. Right and Miss Right, then they'll be pretty boring characters. And that's how to write a good romantic novel.